Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to welcome everyone out. My name is Allison, and I'm one of the account managers at Summit Interconnect. And today we're going to be discussing just PCB assembly and tips that will help you to have a better experience with your assembly partner. And we're going to just give you some tips and tricks that will help you to better, just to have a overall better experience and things that you may not have thought of before. So we're going to go to the next slide. So Summit Interconnect is a privately held PCB manufacturer, the largest in North America. We have a lot of different sites and can offer many different types of PCB manufacturing as well as assembly. So you can kind of read a couple of the points that we have here. We offer everything from prototype to production PCB manufacturing. And we also have our own assembly facility, which is Advanced Assembly. So even though Advanced Assembly has a different name, they are a part of the Summit family. And so it's been around for 17 years. They do a lot of prototypes to production assembly. So they have a lot of experience in what they're talking about today. So we have 8 different manufacturing sites, all located across the country. We have Santa Clara, Hollister, Santa Ana, California, Anaheim, and those are all our California sites. Then we have in Denver, Colorado, we have Advanced Assembly, which is our assembly facility. We have Chicago, Illinois, and Toronto, Canada. So we have 8 different sites, which allows us to specialize in a lot of different types of product. We have facilities focused specifically on quick turn, and then we also have facilities that are for aerospace and defense. So whatever project you have, we have a home for that job. So today specifically, we'll be talking about assembly, but if you have any questions, we want to let you know that we have a chat that is going to be open. You can also ask at any time if you have any question, just use the Q&A function or the chat, and I'll be monitoring that so that if you have something you want to ask during the presentation, please go ahead and ask, and then we'll also have a time for questions at the end. So today's speakers, we have Pat Farrell, who's the sales manager at Advanced Assembly. So I'm going to give him a minute to just kind of introduce himself and his experience with assembly.
Thanks, Allison, and welcome everyone. My name is Pat Farrell. I'm the sales manager here at Advanced Assembly. I've been with the company since 2010. My team primarily manages the Midwest, the Southeast, and up the Eastern Seaboard. So look forward to sharing some assembly topics and best practices with you all today.
And then our second speaker is Chow Vang, who's our senior engineering manager at Advanced Assembly, and she's going to share a little bit about herself as well. I think Chow is frozen. So Pat is going to go ahead and share this next slide with us.
Yes, hopefully Chow will come back up in a few minutes. Chow's our senior engineering manager, manages our coding engineering team as well as our process engineers. So the whole goal of this webinar today is to ultimately, share some ideas, tips of the trade, if you will, on how to set your job up for success. The more communication we can have back and forth between you as the client and our manufacturing facility, A, we're trying to reduce holds, B, ship on time, if not early, and deliver the best quality possible. So a couple of the topics we'll cover today are file submission requirements. So, what type of files we're looking for, what formats, and the needed information in all the different files. Common mistakes to avoid. We can share some success stories as well as some horror stories that we've seen in the past when we get information in not optimal formats. Drawing and assembly notes, really how to capture fab and assembly notes, keep them separate, and where to document those type of notes. Metric and imperial confusion. Just diving into your bill of materials and in the manufacturer's part numbers you call out in the descriptions and making sure those match. Kitting components. So if you're consigning a full kit or a partial kit to us, how to set our team up for success there. Internal challenges that we see and how you can help us overcome those. Best practices for each facility. All CMs and SMT facilities have their own equipment and processes. So kind of knowing and understanding who you're working with and what they do can be successful to both of us. And as Allison mentioned, we'll have a brief Q&A session at the end to answer any questions that come up in the chat bot.
So this next slide is going to talk kind of a little bit about the files that are needed for submission for assembly. So obviously you have to have a BOM, otherwise we don't know what we're going to be putting on the board. So we have, everyone kind of has different requirements for what they need on the BOM, but the very basic things are the reference designators, the manufacturing part number. A lot of times, you'll see a BOM where it's left up to us to decide what parts, but we'd really rather you just provide and tell us exactly what part you would put on the BOM. At our facility, we prefer just to have that information up front. We, for you to provide us what part or what alternates that you've already selected that could work for that particular part number. So if you have that information for us, we prefer that. Description, value, package. A lot of times the BOM won't have descriptions on it, but we really need that information so that we can verify that the part that you've selected will fit the footprint that you have on your board. And so we want all of this information up front. It makes it a lot easier for us to do our job and to know exactly what you've given us, that we have all the information that we need. So you can also include alternate part numbers. We'll reference those as we're quoting. So if something's not available, we can just quickly, select that. And that will make the quoting process go much smoother if you give us all this information up front. If you give us a partially completed BOM, if you're missing things, if you have, certain part numbers that say, to be determined, all of that's going to just slow down the quoting process. So if you can give us as much information as possible, that will make the quote go a lot smoother. And then as far as Gerbers, this is the minimum of what we need to actually assemble the board. So top and bottom copper layers, top and bottom silk screen, and top and bottom solder paste layers. And another thing to note is, if you're working with a fab shop, if you're making any updates, if you're consigning the boards or it's best if you can order turnkey through us. But if you happen to be consigning, make sure that any updates that you make during your DFM, that you're also passing those on to your assembly shop as well, because that, we need that latest data set. And then on the assembly drawing, we want to know if it's RoHS or non-RoHS, any special cleaning requirements. A lot of times with prototypes, people don't have an assembly drawing, but if you can provide all of this up front, you're going to have a much smoother build. And Pat, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, the other notes I would add into an assembly drawing, obviously the RoHS and leaded are critical. Cleaning requirements, no clean versus RoHS, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Any special instructions or requirements for mechanical components, press fit components, etc. Post-assembly testing, AOI, X-ray, flying probe test, and any special handling requirements or packaging instructions that you may need. I've had clients in the past that might list this information and it might be in a fab drawing. On the assembly end, we're really just going to look at the Gerber files in the assembly drawing. So to keep those notes separate for the assembly side would greatly set up your build for success, so we can flow that down to the manufacturing facility.
Okay, so some common mistakes to avoid. One is customers not providing the complete files. We see that a lot and that's going to hold up your build for something really simple. So just make sure that you provided a complete package. That way we have everything that we need up front. And when we get to the engineering side, we're not having to come back and ask you for a file, because that's going to frustrate you if you've ordered a certain lead time and then now we're coming back to ask you for something. And then also assembly notes put into the BOM instead of the drawing. It really needs to be on the drawing, because that's what engineering is going to be referencing as they're coding your build. So make sure that those notes are on the drawing. And then polarity is a big thing that ends up getting asked during the DFA. So if you can just indicate that in advance. That will help us just to know where, what rotation to put the package on the board. And then I don't know if Patrick, if you want to talk a little bit about the metric confusion, I think we have a slide for that as well, or if you want to add anything to the mistakes that can come up.
Yeah, a few more issues just to add on to the mistakes to avoid. To quote a build, I really just need your bill of materials in Excel and your Gerber files. And a lot of times we quote a build, we can get all the parts, we get a PO and get underway, and all your files will then go to our engineering team, and they'll complete the design for assembly check. Basically going line by line in your bill of materials and checking each part to the footprint on your board. One of the biggest files we're missing right away is usually the XYRS or the paste. So having that from the get-go, our engineering team does work 24/7. So if we get an order late in the afternoon and might be in the coding process throughout the evening, knowing we have all those files up front, again, we'll just set your build up for success, and we can get to day one much faster.
So
when it comes to drawing and assembly notes, really critical just to keep them separate, as I mentioned earlier. On the fab side, all your fab notes, and then on the assembly side, all your assembly notes. So, maybe it's notes for conformal coating or notes for staking, ROHAS that we mentioned earlier, class 2 and class 3. All these things are really pertinent information that we need, and as long as it's in the assembly drawing, it's really just going to avoid us asking more questions or potentially doing something wrong.
Pat, do you want to kind of discuss the difference between the imperial and metric?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everyone. Different cabinet will greatly help reduce issues and questions. In our DFA software, designed for assembly software that we utilize on the front end, not only does it do kind of a spell check for your PCBs and ensure that there are no showstoppers when we go to the floor, it also programs our pick and place machines. So when our engineers are pulling your manufacturer's part number, grabbing that footprint in our library and matching it up to the board, having the part number and description matching just helps kind of streamline that process and avoid us asking more questions. Do's and don'ts with parts and connector placements. One thing our DFA software doesn't catch is through-hole components. The only way we can, really verify a through-hole component is when we have the parts and boards in-house. In the NPI world, our standard turn times are 3 to 5 days. So that's 3 to 5 days throughout the entire process. Usually SMT is the fastest part of that process, and we're placing through-hole components on, maybe 24 to 36 hours before we're going to ship. And that's generally when we notice maybe an issue of a component not placing or not fitting the board properly. Maybe we've got 6 holes in the footprint of the board, but the part we have only has 4. So knowing what standards we can and cannot place will greatly add some success and get your build shipped out quicker and faster. Kitting components. We obviously are a full turnkey shop, so we can source your whole kit and manage everything for you. You're obviously welcome to supply an entire kit to us should you want to do that, or maybe you just want to supply a few components. Maybe they're components that would have long lead times, or maybe they're proprietary to you, or maybe you've pre-programmed them, whatever have you. We do have a generic overage guidelines that we can send out to you with a quote. We also on our website have a overage calculator where you can plug in what type of component it is, how many required for the build, and it'll let you know what overages we need for that particular component. Advanced assembly is extremely flexible on the components we receive. For example, we have a custom tray system in-house where we can actually hand place components onto these trays and then load them in our machines alongside the reels. So when we order, a small run of, let's say 5 boards, and we're, buying, cut tape, maybe tubes, trays, maybe they're loose in a bag from, let's say, DigiKey or Mauser, we can still machine place these components. So when you do send parts to us, it's always best to use our kitting labels, and we can send those to you with the quote. You can slap these onto the bags. It just helps our process in the back. We can scan them in and quickly know what parts go to what line item in your bill of materials. Making sure that the parts you do send out are addressed to your quote number, which will also be your build number. Sharing tracking information with us, so our team can hunt those down. Same thing if you're sending a fully consigned kit, and maybe you went to buy the parts the day before you shipped them to us, and let's say a few parts weren't in stock and you went ahead and subbed those components. Well, we're going to put your job on hold if we get parts that don't match your BOM. So anytime you're making part number changes, if you can let us know, before you're sending us those parts, we can make those changes here on the fly. But really having, even if you don't have the ability to use our kit labels, as long as we have the manufacturer's part number, the description, and the reference designator, and that package is shipped to your attention of your job number, that'll greatly help our receiving team. I've seen some horror stories back in the day of customers sending us parts and maybe pill bottles or a box like you'd have on your workbench at home with nuts, bolts, and screws on it, and really nothing's labeled and parts are just loose in trays. Makes our life very, very difficult, slows down the process. Ideally, we want to check in your kit, verify that we have everything, and get it to the production floor as quickly as possible to start setting up our custom trays, loading reels, and then as soon as boards arrive, get ready to paste and hit the machines. Challenges with files. One thing we run into a lot, especially in the NPI world, is clients always making changes to their files, which is fine, and we can accommodate that. It's no problem at the quoting end. Send us as many updates you have, and we'll send you a final quote once we have final files. But once our engineering team does their coding work, and let's say they notice a part footprint error, maybe it's a passive component and the footprint on the board calls out an 0603, but your part number calls out an 0402. Well, that's optimal, or excuse me, that's not optimal. We could place that part, but it's not optimal. And so a lot of times our engineering team will send you an email and explain what the issue is. They'll maybe drag in some pictures or a snapshot of your BOM. Ideally, they're looking for you just to reply back with either, hey, place it as is, or provide the new part number in the email. Because when you send out a full new set of Gerber files and a full new BOM package, we're basically going to have to start the entire process back over again. Compare what changed, update everything. Again, we're just going to slow down the process before we get to the floor. So, obviously, if you have to completely retool something in your Gerber files, no problem, update that. But if you're making a minor change, or maybe it's as simple as, one file was missing, or maybe you had to correct something on a paste aperture. If you can just send us the file in which you're changing, as opposed to resending the entire package, that will greatly speed up our, time to the floor and, ultimately get boards in your hands faster with the best quality possible. Clean versus no clean. So I'll back up to kind of the start of the process. We have 2 ways to apply paste to your boards. We can use water-soluble paste, or we can use no clean. Many years ago when I first came into this industry, almost every board was done leaded with water-soluble paste. And today the tides have completely flipped. Majority of everything we run is no clean and RoHS. So we use automatic inkjet paste printers here at Advanced Assembly that apply paste directly to the boards. The one downfall is they only use no clean solder paste. They have a leaded version and a lead-free version. We like using the paste printers for multiple reasons. Number one, we don't have to go out and cut a stencil at a third party and have it shipped in. So we save time there. We also save money on the stencil. We also have tremendous flexibility and accuracy that it provides as the world has evolved and boards getting smaller, more dense, smaller components, finer pitch, passive components down to 0105s, micro VGAs. Our quality has dramatically improved with these paste printers and their accuracy. We also have a lot of flexibility. We run an in-house first article on every job. So after reflow, if we notice a couple parts shifting in reflow, we can simply make a change to the paste aperture in these machines as opposed to recutting a new stencil. We can also add and delete solder paste if we need to for certain components to get them to wet properly. So understanding that we generally use no clean. So if you don't have any call out in your files, we're going to use the paste printer. We'll use your preference of leaded or lead free. We do clean the boards 100%. However, no clean solder paste doesn't come off 100% like a water soluble was. So if you do need your board squeaky clean and zero solder imperfections on the board, let us know that. We may have to run them through the washer a couple times. If you do have microphones or switches or anything that can't be washed on your boards, we'll designate those parts as DNI through the process and hand install them at the end with just a manual little touch-up wash as opposed to running them through the batch washers. In the event you do want water soluble, that's fine. We can go that route. We would just have to order a stencil, and again, they could still go through our batch washers. And I would like to note, Advanced Assembly did just purchase 2 new washers just in the last 2 months, and seeing dramatic improvements in those as time has gone on. So lastly, just to wrap things up, and I hope this was beneficial for everyone, is really just understanding, who you're working with on the assembly end. I tell my clients all the time, we'll do whatever you want. We're extremely flexible. However, if you can follow some steps and some guidelines that we offer and throw out there, all we're doing is just trying to help set up our team for success, which ultimately is going to set your company up for success and provide the best quality possible and get boards to you on time. We want to be an extension of your company and work with you not only on your prototype builds, but carry it on to production or wherever your quantities may go. So in summary, I hope you found it beneficial to learn a little bit about the notes and drawings that we're looking for, what type of files we need, especially the XYRS or pick and place file, build of materials in Excel, Gerber files. And I know we mentioned Gerber files a lot. We can take ODB files as well. So if that's what your CAD software spits out, we can work with those as well. And just making sure we have all the notes in the assembly drawing. So otherwise, I appreciate everyone's time, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box.
Yes, so I also wanted to mention that we will be providing the recording of the webinar to everyone that's attended and also whoever has registered. So that will be sent out to you later this week. And then in the chat, if there's any questions, feel free to ask those right now. We did have a question: is ODB++ the recommended Gerber format for AAPCB? So I know on the fab side, we do prefer ODB++, but I think for assembly, if you have the Gerbers, I think that's easiest, but they can work with either format. Then there's also a question: do you guys make your BOM builder available to your customers to help verify placement? Pat?
At this time, we don't, but it is a really quick process for us. So we do have the ability to run that software for you at the time of quoting. Just request that to whoever your sales rep is. So we'll send you the quote, and then when we go through the BOM builder, it builds your board virtually. So we'll send out a 2D PDF image of your board, and then we'll list any of the issues. Maybe it's a polarity marker missing off the silk screen, or verification of how to install a certain LED, or maybe there's a footprint issue. So that way you can either retool the Gerbers if you need to add a new footprint, or change the part number in the BOM. Maybe one day it might be available to clients, but today it is just an in-house thing.
Okay, so there's another question. Are there any particular design or part factors that can dramatically change up or down the price for turnkey or assembly services, perhaps unintentionally? So what kind of factors make an assembly more expensive? Can you kind of talk on
The
that?
the biggest difference is obviously the more through hole components you have is going to drive up the price. So the more you can stick to surface mount, that's greatly going to speed up your build process. We're going to offer quicker turns in the lowest price possible. Outside of that, there aren't many parts that we can't place. We don't charge any extra for a BGA versus an 0402. The only other parts outside of through hole that would drive up the cost would be press fit components. In some press fit components, you won't see much of an increase, really, unless it's an oddball component that we haven't seen or seen recently or seen at all, and we might need to order a custom jig for it.
Okay, so and then we had a question regarding if we have an example of a BOM template that would maximize ease of understanding, and we do have that. So
absolutely, we do have it on our website, and we can also send that to you as well. And yeah, that greatly helps. We follow that format, we can load it into our system at the front end, and it just makes everyone's life easier.
Okay, Pat, what do you recommend for fiducials? The size, shape, location? Can you comment on that?
In the NPI world, we run my data pick and place machines here at Advanced Assembly, so we actually don't require rails or fiducials. However, if you know a board's going to go into volume, you might as well tool it correctly from the beginning. So I'd recommend putting 2 fiducials in opposite corners, and then we might not need it on the prototype end, but when we go into production of let's say 100 or 1,000 or more, better to have them then, and that way we're not having to retool the array.
Okay, there's a question. How do you handle electrostatic discharge at your manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, so we're an ESD facility. You can't walk into production without seeing a giant sign. All the operators wear static jackets, or everyone that walks through the facility. All the employees and solder techs, depending on their function and their task, they would either wear shoe straps on both shoes, anti-static shoes, or be grounded with a wrist strap. ESD paint on the floors, ESD mats on the tables, and everything's grounded. Even when your parts and boards come in, whether you consign them or we supply them, they go into an anti-static box. And same thing when we're shipping. All the boards are individually packaged in anti-static bags and bubble wrap to ensure we don't have any issues frying a component or anything like that along the process.
And then one thing that wasn't asked in the questions, but we didn't really talk about was for as far as like overages when people are consigning components. It varies a lot facility to facility, and so I think that's an important thing to note. Just we have documents available that will tell you exactly what we need as far as overage for different types of components. And it's so frustrating to an engineer when they've worked so hard to get a design out, and then they're just short on one component, and that holds up the entire build. So if you choose to consign your components, be sure that you get that document from us and that you provide enough, because oftentimes it's these components that you could have spent $2 more and bought 50 more resistors, and the job would have kept going. But just because we're short on one component, we're unable to run the entire job if it's an SMT place part. So that's just something that I want to throw out there, that we do have documents available that will explain exactly what we need. And as much as you can prevent upfront, by providing enough overage, by including everything in your documentation, providing an assembly drawing, all of that will help us to be able to deliver the boards faster. So that's just something that I wanted to note. And then
that was a really great point, Allison. I'll just say one more thing. We're really flexible on components when it comes to ICs, through-hole components, expensive parts. But following the overage guidelines really for the smaller passives is really what we're after. And, as you mentioned, they are typically the smaller parts. So spend a couple extra dollars, get a decent sized piece of cut tape. We're just going to avoid your job going on hold.
Yes. So, and then there's a couple questions about the bare fab. So, one thing, there's a question on here, are tooling holes required? There's not tooling holes required, I don't think, on the assembly side. On the fab side, we create tooling holes on the panel, and those get routed off when the board gets delivered to assembly. So the tooling holes on the fab side, on the bare board side, we put those on the production panel, and our engineers take care of that, so the customer doesn't have to worry about where do those tooling holes need to go. So you as the engineer don't have to worry about putting tooling holes on your design. And then there's a couple questions regarding cost. Some of the things that drive up the cost on a bare fab is, if you have via fill, that's going to increase the lead time of your job because it's going to add an additional drilling cycle, an additional plating cycle, and then of course the via fill process. So all of that's going to add time, and which in turn adds money to the design. So it's not so much that you're filling, it's not the epoxy material, it's more that you're adding all of these different steps. So that's something to think about. And then of course, if you add lamination cycles, that adds a lot. And some people are asking about stack ups, you can send an email to us. It's first.last name. So my email, allison.herrera@summitinterconnect.com, or go to our website or aapcb.com. You can send a quote request there, and we can get you stack ups to help you with your design. And then there's a question, do any of your facilities have the ISO 80079-34 quality certifications? I am not sure about that. So have you heard of that, Pat?
I am not familiar with that one. I know obviously on the assembly end, we're ISO 9001:2015, and we have AS 9100 certification. I know majority of our shops, even on fab, have the AS certification. A lot of them are NADCAP. They're all ITAR, but I'm not familiar with the one you mentioned.
Yeah, that one I haven't heard, but it is possible. I have a document that I can send out that shares all the different quality standards for each site, whether they're AS 9100 or ISO 9001, like each specific cert for each site. So I have that information. I'll send my email here in the chat if anybody needs something, some kind of document. And then I do not see any other questions coming through. So thank you all so much for joining us today and for asking the questions. And again, we'll have this provided for you, the recording. So we'll send this out after the webinar is complete. And you can reach out to us via our websites, aapcb.com or summitinterconnect.com. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Allison.